Conference play starts tonight for the Boilermakers, who will be at the rack against Rutgers. Find out what they need to do to pull off a conference win on today's Locked On Boilermakers.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network, where it's your team every day. I am your host. I am Nick Arvin. I cover the Boilers every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I also write about Purdue for Purdue 24/7. And we have a fun episode coming your way today. Today's episode is brought to you guys by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So today we're going to talk about game one of conference play. What's on the line for both of these teams, both of these teams' schedules to this point, and what needs to happen for Purdue to come out of the rack with an early conference win. We'll talk about the matchups in this game, what Rutgers has to offer, what Purdue's going to throw out there, and then we'll finish off today's episode talking my game picks, who I have winning, and why. And I'll finish that off, of course, with my Purdue versus Rutgers pick for tonight. But let's go ahead and talk about both of these teams. Let's talk about these teams going into game number one of conference play, which it's kind of unbelievable that it's already here. It feels like the season just started up, and now we've already got a conference game. And Purdue, they're going to be hitting the road. They're going to head to the rack in Rutgers in New Jersey, and that's a tough environment. It honestly is. And we're going to get into it, but Rutgers isn't necessarily the most competitive team. They're not the best team this year. They're not the Rutgers of past where, yes, maybe not the best program in terms of where Purdue is or where Indiana is, et cetera, but they have had talented players. They have had talented teams. I don't know if this year's team is going to be one of them, but it still definitely is early. They still do have a couple of guys that are going to be good that we're going to talk about in today's episode, but you have to look at the early season losses, and they have three of them. One of them is really tough, and that one is to Central Connecticut. They lose 67-54 to Central Connecticut, and that's going to be a loss that you look at all year for Rutgers. That one is really going to hang over their head, and we didn't think that Rutgers was necessarily going to be one of those tournament teams, maybe on the border, but with the early season loss like that, it's tough to get in. But if you're a Scarlet Knight fan, yes, that loss, it stings, but it goes away with a win over Purdue. So that's what's on the line for Rutgers. They want to avenge that early season loss. They want to avenge some of those losses that they racked up in the Players era, losing to Tennessee, losing to a Notre Dame. They did get a win over UNLV, 80-65, so they'll be coming into this game off of a win. But I do think that this Rutgers team they're talented from a perspective of they have a lot of length, they're very physical, and they're well coached. That's what this Rutgers team has to offer. They don't necessarily have that number one guy or that scoring prowess where you look at this Rutgers team and say, hey, they're going to outscore you, especially when you have an offense the way that Purdue has. And that Purdue offense is going to be talked about a lot this year because it may be one of the most efficient offenses that we've seen to date, averaging over 1.5 points per possession, which is absolutely insane for a college basketball team. And we know how the Boilermakers have been playing. They've been rebounding the ball at an elite level with Cluff, with Trey Kaufman Ren, and I expect that to largely continue coming into this game. Rutgers, they do have a center who we'll talk about here in this next segment, but they don't have a ton of rebounding numbers in the way that Purdue is going to have, whereas their leading rebounders, Cluff, at 10 rebounds a game. Ogboli is Rutgers' center. He's going to be their starting center. He's only averaging about 7.5 rebounds a game. So we can kind of get a look as to how Purdue is a little bit better from that perspective. Something else that Purdue is better at is just pure scoring. 89.7 points a game for Purdue going into this game. And Rutgers is not quite there. They're only scoring about 71 points per game. So especially from an offensive perspective, I do think that this Rutgers team, they're going to be solid defensively this year. And yes, you can look at that loss to Central Connecticut and say that this Rutgers team is underachieving. Although that is fair, I do think that they will be solid defensively because they do have that length. They have plenty of guys that have size, and they have a couple solid point of attack defenders. But from an offensive perspective, from a rebounding perspective, this Rutgers team doesn't really match up against Purdue in a way where you expect them to get a win. However, it's the first game of conference play. We have seen in past years that maybe that game is tricky, especially on the road. Crazy things happen. So I'm not saying that Purdue is necessarily going to go into this game and dominate the way that they did this past weekend, the way that they have done against some similar teams in the past. But what I am saying is that they'll have a good opportunity, a good matchup for their first conference matchup to potentially get a win. But the most crucial part of getting a win in New Jersey tonight is going to be not sleepwalking, not going into that environment, not going into the rack sleepwalking, because we've seen that a couple times now. And even a little bit early against Eastern Illinois, where maybe Purdue turned the ball over a little bit more than they would have liked to. That could have hurt Purdue at some points in that game. Luckily, they pulled away because Eastern Illinois isn't the best team. But in games against Memphis and games against Oakland early on in the season, against teams that you may view a little bit lesser than, whether that's fair or whether it's not, a Rutgers team that has lost to Central Connecticut, it's easy to look at that game and to go into that game and say, we're the Purdue Boilermakers, we're number one in the nation, it's going to be an easy win. That's easy to say, and I feel like at times this Purdue team, they have done that. They cannot afford to do that on the road in a conference game at all. I don't care if it's against Rutgers. I don't care what team it's against. In conference play in the Big Ten this year, these teams are going to be too good from top to bottom for you to go sleepwalking into a road environment and win that game. That's just the nature of this conference this year. That's how talented I expect to be the conference this year. So Purdue absolutely can't do that. And we got to get that figured out. And you have an opportunity to get it figured out tonight at the rack against Rutgers. If Purdue can get it figured out where they can go into that environment, they can get a nice win against a team that the expectations aren't too high, I feel like I'll be more comfortable with where Purdue is going into conference play in terms of playing similar games. Because right now, I feel more comfortable that Purdue is going to beat Auburn or Iowa State this weekend than I feel playing some of those teams that maybe you view as lesser than, maybe a Rutgers. And I'm not trying to talk too bad about that program because they're not a terrible basketball team, but they're not Purdue. And I worry that at times Purdue may put that into perspective and it may hurt the Boilermakers. I certainly hope that is not the case. I hope that they don't go into the rack sleepwalking, but we're going to have to see, and we're going to have to see tonight. In this next segment, I want to talk about some of these Purdue matchups. There's a lot of them because this Rutgers team is very talented. And that brings me to my final point here before we get to some of those matchups, is that if you're Purdue, that offensive consistency, it's going to be on display, and we expect it to be on display. But if you're not able to shoot the ball at the level that you've done at home in the rack, which that could be possible, that is an expectation that it's possible that Purdue doesn't shoot the ball at the level that they have at some points in this year. I need you to keep going, keep pushing, keep getting to the rim. If you're Purdue, you have to let that consistency go for you. You have to let that efficiency go for you. If you're missing shots, if things aren't going your way, ultimately you're efficient enough where it's going to come back around. Eventually, those shots are going to fall. And when you're getting enough high quality looks, the way that Purdue is consistently able to get at this point in the year, you're going to find success. But you have to play within yourselves. Don't lose that momentum. Oftentimes, Purdue, they'll get themselves into foul trouble or turn the ball over when shots aren't falling. You can't do that against a Rutgers team like this. But I think if they're able to play clean basketball, if they're able to win some of these matchups we're about to talk about, they'll be able to find success. But let's talk about those matchups. That's going to be here next on Locked On Boilermakers. The holidays always feel a little bit easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers hand-craft perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. Omaha Steak, it's perfect to gift to anybody, family members. I've already ordered a couple because it's just that affordable, easy to gift. You can ship them out wherever you need. It's the perfect opportunity to get a loved one a really high quality gift this Christmas season. So save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See their site for details. If you guys have made it here so far, I really appreciate you guys sticking around. And please, if you guys haven't so far, just now seeing us, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It all helps us out a ton. It's free, and we really appreciate it. But let's talk some of these matchups. Let's talk the matchups that are going to be on display tonight in this Rutgers versus Purdue conference opener. So the first player that I want to talk about, and of course, we always have to talk about the leading scorer. And the leading scorer for Rutgers, 15.6 per game. It's Dylan Grant. He's a forward for the Scarlet Knights. He's going to be about 6'8". And this is a guy that shoots the ball at a very high efficiency, over 50%, a sophomore forward. This is a big guy. He's a big forward, and he's going to make you pay. Kind of that small forward type role. Can play the power forward position if you need him to. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Whether Trey Kaufman Ren matches up against that guy, I think that's primarily where we're going to see Dylan Grant is against Trey Kaufman Ren. And that's going to lead the question, is Dylan Grant going to be able to rebound the ball at a high enough level to have those plus minutes against Trey Kaufman Ren? Because Dylan Grant, he's going to be a starter for these guys. He plays a lot of minutes for him, but he's only averaging 6.6 rebounds per game, which, I mean, for what he is pretty good. He's their power forward, small forward type role, and he's not going to rebound the ball. He's their second leading rebounder, but that's not what you want him to do. He's going to be that scorer for you. So if you're Trey Kaufman Ren, the opportunity to rebound against a guy in Dylan Grant, who is a big power forward, but still, you have that opportunity to be a little bit bigger, to be a little bit of a bigger rebounder. I think that Trey Kaufman Ren, the matchup on Dylan Grant, is going to be huge for where Purdue goes in this matchup. I think that if Trey Kaufman Ren is able to do kind of what he did against Texas Tech and JT Toppin, now it wasn't just him, it was also Oscar Cluff, a combination of him and Daniel Jacobson, their ability to force JT Toppin into some tough looks. But if Purdue and TKR are able to do that to Dylan Grant tonight to make him have difficult looks, I think that Purdue is going to have a great opportunity to win this game. And that happens when Purdue is able to limit other teams' number one guy. When Purdue has been able to do that, we saw that with LeBaron Philon against Alabama. They've had a lot of success because then the pace starts to play through you. You get to determine how that game is played, and then it gets to go through Braden Smith, gets to go through TKR. All of that is a product of stopping other teams' number one scorers, their number one guy. If Purdue and Trey Kaufman Ren are able to do that against Dylan Grant, I think that they're going to find a great level of success. Someone else that we must talk about is the starting center for this team. We brought him up a little bit in the previous segment, but his name is Emmanuel Ogboli, and he's from Nigeria. He's going to be a senior center, about 6'10". He's definitely a big guy at 260 pounds. This is going to be a physical center, a traditional guy, and this is probably going to be that Oscar Cluff matchup, even a Daniel Jacobson matchup that we might see, depending on the minutes. We did see a really big career night for Daniel Jacobson, who is still on that field goal streak where he hasn't missed. He's the program leader right now and made field goals in a row. Still has an opportunity to get that streak, keep it going. So we may see a lot from him, may see a lot from Oscar Cluff, but their number one job in this game is going to be able to contain Emmanuel Ogboli, keep him off the boards because this guy is extremely physical. That's what he offers. He's going to be a high-efficiency guy that's not going to want to shoot the ball from far out, within 10 feet, get the ball inside the hoop, get inside, and score. That's what he's going to be. Averages out about 7 rebounds a game, 7.5, 62% from field goal range. So you kind of see that he is that center where he's that traditional guy that's going to want to get inside, be that bruiser, and beat you that way. But Purdue, they also have a similar guy in Oscar Cluff. And Oscar Cluff does have better stats, in my opinion, on the season. 11 points, 11 points, 10 rebounds. That's a double-double. So obviously, Oscar Cluff has absolutely produced for Purdue throughout this season. And I think that it's going to be a good matchup for Oscar Cluff because I think he's going to be able to limit alongside Daniel Jacobson. And this is going to be a matchup where those two bigs are really going to be big because that depth against a guy in Ogboli, who he's going to have to play quite a few minutes for this Rutgers team because they don't have that other big. They do have Ogboli, who plays about 20 minutes a game. You could also look at Dennis Badaloo, he's a freshman, big for Rutgers. We'll see him a little bit, but he's going to rotate in with Ogboli. But ultimately, Rutgers, they just don't have the quality of bigs that Purdue has. When you look at Oscar Cluff, who's averaging a double-double. You look at Daniel Jacobson, who's averaging 10 points, 5 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks a game. That depth, that leverage that you have when you have two very high-quality centers, it's really going to show up for Purdue in conference play. And I expect it to show up for Purdue against this Rutgers team. As we kind of talk about some more matchups, I want to talk about Tariq Francis. And he's probably going to be their leading guard out of that backcourt. Yeah, we talked about their leading scorer in Dylan Grant, who's going to be kind of that number one guy in terms of wanting to get looks. But when I look at Tariq Francis, I look at a guy that is that aggressive guard for this team. Has 13 points on 42% from the field. He's not going to be a guy that is a real big playmaker. And that's kind of the trend for this Rutgers team. They don't have a guy like Braden Smith where they're going to have that playmaker that really stands out, where it says that you have to guard this guy. And if not, he's going to open up other looks. I don't know if Rutgers necessarily has that. And that has at times this year created a bit of a one-dimensional offense where they're not able to get great looks. And we brought it up earlier, but the one thing I do want to say is that 1 through 5, this team, all very great defenders. I'm not denying that Rutgers is going to be a good defensive team, but I do have question marks about whether this team is going to be able to do anything on offense. And if you're Purdue, a team that's desperately and not trying to get confidence in their defense because they don't have a good defense, but a program that we know what the offense is. We just need to see that this defense can operate at a high level throughout conference play. It's a great opportunity against Rutgers for a team that is definitely struggling on the offensive side of the ball, that doesn't have a guy that can necessarily go out and just change the game. They have good scores, but they don't have that guy. Tariq Francis, he's a good scorer, has 13 points per game this year, but he doesn't change the game for Rutgers. He's not going to be a guy that you look at after the game that has 20 points and just had a couple crazy plays that swung momentum in this game. I don't think Rutgers has that. So it's going to create a bit of an interesting situation where can the Scarlet Knights ride that momentum at home? Can they find some opportunities on that home court to build momentum up that they may not usually have on the road or in different environments? Because it's going to be a big matchup for Rutgers. And ultimately, that's what I come back to. For Purdue, it's the opportunity to start conference play out strong. It's the opportunity to get out to 7-0, to really just get out hot, get conference play started right, get a statement win against Rutgers, and just keep it moving down the track. But for Rutgers, a little bit different. They want this opportunity to change the way that their season's going. An incredibly embarrassing loss to start out the season. Something needs to change for that Rutgers team. And they have a good defense. They have a good coach. But if they're Rutgers, you look at this game against Purdue on your home floor, it's an opportunity. This is certainly going to be a motivated Scarlet Knights team. So ultimately, I go back to what I've said from this game, what I said on the weekend. Don't go into this game sleepwalking. If Purdue is able to do that, I feel that they have the matchups to win this game. I'm going to give my prediction in here in this next segment, so make sure you stick around. We went over matchups. We went over what needs to go right for both of these programs. Let's get to my official prediction. That's here next on Locked On Boilermakers. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part, and that's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track prices down in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup or even college basketball games realistic instead of impossible. Game Time is the easiest way to get into Mackey Arena, and it's how I get into Mackey Arena. It's accessible, easy, and you can track the best prices in all of the business. The layout's very accessible, super simple, so you can find great seat views and compare those seats. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup or college basketball tickets in every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go. Download Game Time today. I'm going to give my Purdue prediction in this final segment of today's Locked On Boilermakers, but there are actually some huge matchups today, so I want to give my predictions for all of those games, get a bit of a look into the day in college basketball. So we've made it to the final segment of Locked On Boilermakers today, and I'm going to go ahead and give my Purdue prediction. But first, I want to go ahead and look at all of these games that are going on today in the Big Ten and all throughout college basketball, because there are some really big ones as conference play starts up today. So let's go ahead and take a look around the nation first before we get to Purdue. Looking at Big Ten play, a big one at 6 p.m. on Peacock. Iowa and Michigan State, battle of the unbeatens. One of these teams are going to fall, and everyone knows the story behind Iowa and Bennett Stirtz. He's been taking the nation by storm, 18.6 per game. Those assist numbers have dropped a little bit, down to 5.4. But see, he's still the leading force of that team. He averages 38 minutes a game, which is absolutely insane. Bennett Stirtz is going to take up a lot of those minutes that Iowa has to offer, and he's kind of going to try to do it all for the Hawkeyes. So in this matchup against Michigan State, I do think that the number 7 ranked Spartans just have so many different guys from top to bottom. If you look at Jackson Kohler, who's kind of their top guy right now with about 15 points, 10 rebounds on the year, but also they have their point guard, Jeremy Fears Jr., who's at 9 points, 7 assists, and he's looking like the future of that position right now. Cohen Carr is really talented. Cam Ward, Carson Cooper. Michigan State has so many talented players that when you look at a matchup against a team in Iowa, it's just tough to see that Bennett Stirtz is going to be able to beat this team all by himself, especially when, he averages out 38 minutes, but who's to say he's going to be able to play that at a consistent level in this matchup? Who's to say that he's going to shoot from that great efficiency? So if Michigan State is able to limit what Bennett Stirtz is going to do, if they're able to limit the efficiency that he plays at, he's going to have to try to do it all for the Hawkeyes. And I think that Michigan State is just better from top to bottom. And they'll be able to get a really, really big win to start out this season. Purdue, Rutgers, of course, I'll get to that one later. But USC and Oregon, that's the other pristine matchup here tomorrow. Oregon and USC is going to be an interesting one. And honestly, I think that Oregon is going to upset USC here. USC is a 1.5 point favorite, so basically a pick-em matchup there. But Oregon has had an interesting schedule where they've lost 3 tough games in Auburn, San Diego State, and Creighton back-to-back after starting the year out undefeated. But I think they get that ranked win against USC. USC, they've struggled. That game against Troy where they have this crazy last-minute bucket. I really don't think that USC has been as impressive as that record 7-0 suggests. I do think that they take their first loss today against USC, and that one should be a good game in the Big Ten. As far as the rest of the nation goes, Tennessee and Syracuse should be an interesting one. I think that Tennessee is still going to be a good team this year. They got enough star power to win that game. Florida and Duke, this one's going to be really fun. That's the ACC SEC men's challenge. Obviously, Big Ten, we don't have a dog in that fight, but Duke and Florida, that'll be a big matchup. I just think that Duke is incredibly talented this year. I think they're up there in that tier with an Arizona, with a Michigan, with a Purdue, where they've got Boozer, but they have so much more talent surrounding Boozer. He's going to be the name at 23 points per game, almost 10 rebounds. He leads almost every stat for Duke, but they also have Isaiah Evans in that backcourt. They also have Caleb Foster. So surrounding Boozer with those guards, with guys that are going to produce, I just think that Duke is really good. Another great Blue Devils team this year. So they're going to find some success. UConn and Kansas, that's going to be another fun matchup. I don't think UConn is going to get beaten for a while. With Caravan and that team, Danny Hurley has those boys ready. I saw them play the other night. Who was that against? They got a huge win. I can't believe I'm blanking on who that game was against. Arizona and Illinois. They beat the crap out of Illinois, just barely lose to Arizona. But that's going to be a very talented UConn team. They don't play outside of Kansas tomorrow. They play Florida December the 9th. That'll be one to look at. But I think UConn's going to be good the rest of the way here. And that brings us to a couple other big matchups. We got Kentucky and North Carolina. That'll be an interesting game playing up against Caleb Wilson for Kentucky, where Kentucky, they have struggled at times this year. They haven't been perfect. So the opportunity for that team to kind of bounce back in a big spot, it's going to be an interesting game for the Wildcats, to say the least. And I think that this is one that Kentucky really, really needs. If you're North Carolina, you're kind of playing with house money right now. I think they're better than a lot of people expected. But to be fair, Caleb Wilson looks like a top 5 draft pick, so it's tough not to look good. But I think if you're Kentucky, this is one where you're favored by 5.5 points. It's being played at Rupp Arena. You've got to win this game. You have to get your schedule back on the tracks. You have to get this figured out before you go into conference play. I think the ACC SEC Men's Challenge is going to be a big spot against North Carolina for the Wildcats of Kentucky. But that brings us to the final matchup and the most important one, Purdue versus Rutgers. Purdue opens up as a 14.5-point favorite. These are our friends at FanDuel. And I've got Purdue winning this game, of course. I do think that Rutgers is going to cover. I think it's going to be about a 10-point deficit when things are all said and done. Because I don't know if Purdue is going to go into the rack and be dominant the way that maybe we hope they are. I just don't know if they're going to be able to. And that's nothing that I don't think they're talented. Not that I don't think they're capable of getting a win. I just don't think that they're going to go into game number 1 of conference play and dominate in the way that you may expect them if they play Rutgers in February, for example. So with that being said, I'm going to have Purdue winning this game. Let's go 85-75 Purdue. I think it's going to be closer. I think that there's going to be a lot of things that Purdue can work on, that Matt Painter can address after this game. But ultimately, we're going to be in a good spot. We're going to be in a good place where we can kind of see where this Purdue team stands going into conference play with this first conference game and going into a couple big non-conference games the rest of the way. Iowa State is this Saturday. We'll have a preview video a little bit later in the week, so make sure you join us again for that one. But there's a lot of fun matchups coming the way the rest of 2026. And I think tonight is going to be a big first step, the first matchup in conference play. And I think that we may have a better look at whether Purdue can run the table into 2026. Once again, I've got Purdue winning that game 85-75 tonight against Rutgers, but it will certainly be a fun one. And I appreciate you guys joining us once again today on Locked On Boilermakers. Thank you guys for making Locked On Boilermakers your first listen today. For your second listen, consider checking out Locked On Big Ten with Craig Sheeman. He brings everything from the rivalries to the championships and everything in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's part of the podcast network, of course, where it is your team every day. Thank you, guys. And as always, boiler up, hammer down.